Beyond and hello everyone, my name is Jonathon Dornbush and this is Podcast Beyond, IGN's weekly PlayStation show. And if you're watching the video version, we are just such a packed show this week that the internet can't even handle us. We apologize for any pixelation you may be seeing. It's kind of a busy weekend, I think, or week on the internet. I don't even know what day it is. There's quite a bit going on, so we apologize for any technical issues you see, but we have plenty to discuss this week, so hopefully you'll come along with us for this wonderful ride known as Beyond. I'm joined, of course, this week by Brian Altano.
We wanted to see what this show would look like with like PlayStation 1 graphics. I think we're nailing it. I think it's looking good.
This is the D-make of Beyond. Yeah, it's all the rage these days. We're also joined, of course, this week by Max Scoville.
Happy to be here, everybody.
And Mitchell Saltzman. Thank you for being here, Mitchell.
Hey, thank you. Real honored to be here for the D-make of Beyond.
what a better week to have a guest on, of course, than during this D-make. No, of course, we're going to jump into a little bit. We're going to play fast and loose with the run of show this week and how we normally line things up to get in some chat about games coming out this week. But before we do, I wanted to quickly, of course, address that this show we're recording beforehand, and this show will come out before the big Resident Evil Village showcase that's happening this week. So we'll, of course, have impressions and thoughts on that before or next week, after it's been shown off. But I thought I'd just open it to all of you. What are your wild, crazy predictions / hopes? I know we have a lot of Resident Evil fans in the Beyond pantheon. Brian, I'll start with you. What do you want to see from the showcase most?
Nothing. I'm really satisfied with everything, and I think I'm good. No, I want Resident Evil 4 HD. Obviously, I want a remake of that game. I was tweeting about that the other day. I just finished it again. Fantastic game, but there's always a lot of discourse around this game where people are like, it doesn't need a remake. You're right. It doesn't. I personally think that game is perfect and holds up perfectly well, but a lot of people don't. And also, like, you don't have to play it. Like, if it happens, you don't have to play it. I'll play it. You know, maybe I'll be happy with it. Maybe I won't be happy with it. But I have the original version of that game on literally everything it's ever been ported to, except for like that weird. There's it's like an Africa exclusive iPhone console that it came to, called like the Zagu or something. We did a video on it once. I don't remember. It's been a long life. Yeah. But I will totally replay this game again. I can't wait for it. Even if like they add content, cut content, I just want to see it. I just want to see this game again. So see what happens.
Yeah, that's, of course, I think the natural hope of like evolution of where they go with the remakes. I agree with you. It's definitely been released, I feel like, on more platforms than probably anything except for like Super Mario Brothers 3 at this point. But so if you haven't gotten a chance to play it, a remake would be really cool. Of course, there's been no official info about a remake just yet, but it feels like the natural place to go from 2 and 3, especially with all the work they did there. It'd be nice to see a pretty version of 4 that looked like 2 and 3 for sure. Yeah. Max, what about you?
I mean, everything that Brian just said, definitely. Like, I played Resident Evil 4 for the first time, forgive me, like last year, I think that was last. I don't know what year it is currently, but maybe the year before. Anyway, I love that game. Like, that's basically a perfect video game. It doesn't need updating. Like, I think it's parts of it feel a little bit clunky, but for the most part, it's aged really well. But that being said, like, imagining little portions of that game that I played on an airplane on a Switch screen in suddenly, full HDR RE Engine graphics just gives me the willies, gives me the excited willies. But also I hope they reveal how tall is that woman in Resident Evil 8 Village. Like, everyone's noticing that lady's very large. There's a big woman that she has to duck to go under doorways, and she has an enormous hat which obscures her height entirely. I hope they give us a hard number on how tall she is.
Does that make you feel like accepted and seen in the gaming world finally?
I don't know if I've ever talked about this. One of the weirdest things about VR for me is finding out what it's like to be like 5'8".
And what was your finding? What did you feel about our shared experience?
I mean, I feel like I do this the opposite of what I do in real life, because in real life, like, I constantly am slouching because everything's too low for me, but I like have much better posture when I think that I'm like shorter than I should be in a game. Yeah, no, I hope we get some details on 8. I mean, we've already seen bits and pieces of it. It's really close. I don't want them to spoil anything, but like I don't know. I'm sure there's some bell and or whistle that they're gonna, or lion shaped key or whatever that they're gonna reveal and be like, hey, here's the new thing about it. So
yeah, of course, we're going into, it's the 25th anniversary of Resident Evil, I believe, this year. Village is the big question mark, and beyond that, we don't know, I think, anything else of what will be shown. So RE4 remake would be amazing. I imagine we'll see probably some Village gameplay. Hopefully they'll have some other surprises in store. But Mitchell, forgive me, I don't know your like Resident Evil fandom or non, but regardless of it, what would you like to see from this showcase?
Strangely enough, I am a huge coward when it comes to video games, but I am a huge fan of Resident Evil. It's like one of the only big horror franchises I've ever really gotten into. But for me, I might be crazy, but I think the logical next step for the remake series is to go to Code Veronica. Because Code Veronica kind of falls into that kind of early line of Resident Evil games that hasn't really gotten any kind of love in terms of a full remaster. It might have gotten a couple of re-releases or ports, but it's the only mainline Resident Evil game that I haven't touched at all. So I'd be really excited to go back into it and play Code Veronica again. And as far as Resident Evil 8 goes, I feel like there's been like standout moments that really stick out in my mind when it comes to like pre-release stuff for Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 7. Resident Evil 4, obviously the intro with like the Chainsaw Man, and Resident Evil 7, that big dinner scene right at the beginning of the game. So what I would like to see at this showcase is something like that, something that I can really like, put in my memory bank as like, yeah, that's the Resident Evil 8 moment right there.
So you like it when it specifically evokes the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I'm right there with you.
Exactly.
Those beats like specifically, yeah. Like that creepy dinner scene is just like that scene in the movie where they're just sitting there with that old man and he's just like in a wheelchair and he's probably dead, but something inside his skin is moving. I love those games. They're great. I'm actually really surprised that you don't like horror games, because you're awesome at video games.
They're so scary. And I'm in a panic. All the skill just washes away from me.
That makes me feel so much better about things, because you're like stupidly good at games. Like you're, you're like, oh, I'm going to try to beat the tutorial boss in Dark Souls or whatever, just for the hell of it or whatever. But like, I don't know.
I do want to point out
I've never done it.
Oh, really?
You haven't?
No, I haven't.
Was that Brandon who did that?
That's Brendan.
Capcom's having like a huge publisher sale right now across a bunch of platforms, where I think like most of the Resident Evil stuff is like 75% discounted. So if you're looking to replay the old games, I literally just bought Code Veronica this morning for like $4 to play on like a modern I think it's on Xbox right now. I don't know if it's on PS5 yet.
So to touch on what Mitchell said, like, yes, the logical answer is that Code Veronica is the next one they should make. I mean, like, partially because I haven't touched Code Veronica either, but like it is the fourth Resident Evil game. Like, it makes sense. Yeah. It is, continuing with Nemesis. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think isn't mechanically it's also much more in line with like 2 and 3 than it is with 4. Like 4 kind of reinvented the whole situation. Yeah, I know like a lot of people really want Code Veronica because it does continue that and is kind of underrated, but there are also loud idiots like me and Brian who want 4 again better.
Well, for me, I guess I would just say, as someone who really doesn't know Code Veronica well at all, for me, the logical progression is just 4, I guess, on a like mainstream selling these remakes level. Because I guess they're in this weird spot where they are both dipping back into the well of nostalgia, but doing like really, really impressive remake work with it, while also pushing the franchise forward with stuff like Village, but then also doing multiplayer experiments with stuff like, was it Project Resistance, I think it was called, paired with 3. Like they're doing all these different juggling acts. So I guess I could almost see them doing like 4 and Code Veronica together. I don't know if that would work. I don't know Code Veronica well enough to say, but that just almost feels like on a selling level to get people to Code Veronica who don't know the series.
The thing is, like, Resident Evil 3, the remake is actually like it cut up content and it felt pretty short for its price compared to 2, which I think felt like a good deal. And so 3 was I liked it, but it's kind of a letdown, like on the grander scheme. Resident Evil 4 is straight up like a 15 to 20 hour game if you know what you're doing. And so I think they'd have no problem selling that on its own. And they probably know they can get $60 off of that game from, millions of people like me and new fans too. But Code Veronica is like super interesting because it is that weird bridge between 3 and 4 in that it tried some stuff that was like a little bit outside of the norm. It moved away from a lot of the sort of like locked camera angle stuff, made things a little bit more dynamic. It wasn't necessarily like third person pop and shot, but it had a lot of like really cool stuff going for it. It's bizarre. It's super, super weird, which I really like about it. Like it gets into like very almost like campy, like Z tier horror, like kind of more than the other ones do. Like it's there are some really ridiculous enemies and villains in that game that are like very laughable. But I love it. It's a really fun game. I'm actually really excited to replay it this week. But yeah, I'd be down with either of those games. I also think we might get another, the third installment of what's it called? The Revelation series. Yeah. Like it's been a while for that.
A while back, Brian, we did like a sponsored video where you basically just mansplained the entire history of Resident Evil to me. And like Revelations is always kind of sort of stuck out as like an odd, like it's kind of a black sheep in that the first one was on 3DS, right? And then the second one was they were playing around with doing like episodic releases. Was that kind of okay? Yep. So what kind of gimmickry could they force on the third one? If like the first is a 3D portable game and the second is,
the second
episodic.
one also, it tried that thing that they've repeatedly tried, which is like, you retain control of two different characters and you're swapping items and stuff like that. I think that one did a lot better than Zero, which is like super clunky and almost impossible to revisit. No one ever talks about that getting remade, by the way.
I actually liked Resident Evil Zero.
I really did at the time too.
Yeah. What was like the big thing about Zero? It was like, there was no box, so you had to drop items and they would just stay on the floor wherever you dropped them, which was kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah,
but
so
it also made
backtracking.
Yeah, it made for some like interesting inventory management decisions that you had to make because you wouldn't be able to count on a box being in a specific spot.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one of the things that they would probably have to address if they ever remade it.
And I think, Max, to answer your question, gimmick-wise, I think it would either have to be a Battle Royale or a free-to-play mobile game with gachapon mechanics.
There it is. Maybe they go like, pull a Yakuza and they're like, it's turn-based now. It's a party-based RPG. I mean,
I'd be down with that.
Yeah,
it would be super interesting if they brought back Resident Evil Outbreak. That was the online one, or like the co-op one, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's honestly high time for Outbreak to make a comeback in this day and age.
They were teasing this sort of like open beta that like hardcore fans could sign up for, and like a couple people at IGN who I guess were. This made me realize like I'm not as hardcore of a Resident Evil fan as I thought I was. Because like all these people got invites and like I was like I don't think I have a Resident Evil account. What is that?
That's for the ambassador program, I think. They've been teasing, I think, an upcoming sort of project. I wouldn't be shocked if we get word of that. I think the same sort of thing happened with the Project Resistance multiplayer beta. I think ambassadors were getting emails about that a little beforehand, so it might be another multiplayer thing. It might be something else. We'll see. They announced that CG Netflix movie with Leon and Claire that is in the works. So could be a whole host of things. We'll have to see. Obviously, we'll know in just a couple of days whether or not all of our hopes are wrong or right.
There's also the movie reboot and the live action Netflix series. So
they've got a lot going on.
Plenty of stuff going on. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, it is not a bad time for Resident Evil. I think, especially after the love and critical and commercial success 7 and then 2 and 3 have all sort of seen together. This is a very good moment to be into the Resident Evil franchise, and I'm very excited to see what's coming forward, even if I've only recently gotten into the series. But speaking of series also that I haven't played that much, that now I'm very much interested in, I do want to talk about one of the big releases, of course, of not just this week, but January in general. Before we jump into some Sony first-party news in a little bit, I do want to talk, of course, about Hitman 3, which is coming out this week. The review is up on IGN. I believe that review is based on the PC version of the game, but I believe we speak to some other stuff in there. I'm going to go through it in a little bit. Your overall thoughts on Hitman 3 so far?
I love it.
How much you've played too, because you were telling me before the show.
Yeah, so I ended up working on a gameplay montage of our like best kills in Hitman 3. So I've been playing a lot of it. And God, this series is so good. The series is so good, and it really scratches an itch that I've felt for a really long time. Playing a lot of a lot of games that have stealth in them, but aren't really stealth games. Games like Ghost of Tsushima, games like Assassin's Creed. And they all kind of do the Hitman thing where like if you are in the line of sight of an enemy, like a little stealth meter will fill up, and when that meter fills up, you'll be spotted. Hitman 2 does that, or Hitman 3 does that, but there's nuance to it, which I love so much about it. Like if you have a weapon in your hand and you're not supposed to have a weapon in your hand, that meter will fill up super fast. If you are in a disguise and you're not in the right disguise, that meter will fill up super fast. If someone is like doing work, they're like gardening or something, and you walk in front of them, they're distracted, so it'll fill up kind of slow, and you can kind of take that in consideration and be like, okay, I can move across this and not worry about getting spotted because they're preoccupied. Stuff like that is just, it's so good in Hitman. Like the stealth mechanics are just incredibly well thought out, and even though there's still a little bit of jank in terms of the enemy AI, it's at least janky in fun ways that let you kind of manipulate it and kind of have fun with it. Like there was a part where I threw a wrench at a guy's head, knocked him out, and the guy next to him was like, oh, he like brings him up, and I throw a lead pipe at his face, at the guy's face. He goes down again. He's like, oh god, get back up. And then I throw a soda can at his head, and he knocks down again. And he's like, something's going on here. And then he walks over and he slips on a banana peel that I put in his way.
Wait, seriously? There's banana peels?
There's banana peels.
Oh, okay, yeah. Hell yeah.
There are rakes that you can set in the path of someone, and when they step on it, it like a cartoon, it hits them in the head, and they not.
I don't know if you've ever done that, but that's not funny. It hurts a lot.
I think for me, like the biggest question is someone who's like seen and sort of understood the praise for the first two games, at least. Like to me, it's always been the stealth puzzle box, but also a thing that I'm sort of gleaming as I hear more, especially about 3, is there's a lot of comedy to it.
Oh yeah.
Like, based on your gameplay, but like the tools they give you can be very funny.
What I'll say is actually, I think the comedy in Hitman peaked in Hitman 2. Hitman 2 has the craziest things that you can do to people. You can literally turn a man into cocaine. You can throw people into alligator pits. You can, there's a person driving around a track, and a person that you can kill by pushing them onto the track, having the person in the car run them over, crash, and then kill both of them in one go. It's
so good.
It's just absolutely insane. So Hitman 3, I think, tones it down a little on the comedy aspect, and focuses more on just interesting levels that haven't really been done before. One of the things that, I don't know if you're watching the B-roll right now, but that's a murder mystery level where you essentially infiltrate this mansion, and you take the identity of a private investigator that was hired by the family to investigate a murder. And so while you're trying to get your own hit, you're also solving a straight up Knives Out style murder mystery. And it's just really interesting the way that they toy with your expectation in terms of the mission structure in this game.
Yeah, I'm having a ton of fun with this game, and I think it's really incredible because it's so, like, the presentation is amazing. They do that sort of like projected text thing. The graphic design around everything is beautiful. The whole game is just like everyone is all dressed up nice and sexy and stuff like that. But then you do some really dumb, goofy stuff, and it's just genuinely hilarious. And I think a lot of the comedy is basically up to you as the player. Like, I had a lot of sort of like mishaps that just made me just like cackle as I'm running away from like the scene of a crime, or like the first level in this game is basically like a huge party scene, and you have to kill 2 people at this party, but they're surrounded by like dozens of people. So you're like, what do I do? Like, do I poison this guy? Do I distract him? Do I wait till he goes to use the bathroom? You can go into bathrooms and just basically like turn on the toilets and the water and just like make a huge mess and then leave. All these guys come in and they're like, oh, what's going on in here? And like, that's your chance to sneak around, bonk a guy in the head and like steal his clothes, and then like be like, oh, sir, would you like this food? And then kill him. Like, it's so much fun. It's so stupid and so much fun, but it's also so incredibly smart. And like, that's that perfect balance in video games that like you said, Mitchell, like I feel like we're always kind of looking for it. Like I was thinking a lot about Metal Gear Solid 5 and how it evoked a lot of those moments of like mixing action with stealth with comedy in ways that I think that like some were intentional, some weren't intentional. And I think like I really like, it's just, I really like stealth games, but I don't ever really like make a big thing about it. Like, I'm never like, oh, I can't wait to buy a new stealth game. Like, but when it's there in front of me, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I love this feeling. Like, it's not really a genre like I call myself a fanboy of or anything, but when I'm in the midst of playing a game like this, I'm having the time of my life, and it's just so much fun. And I just really love how this game gives you so many opportunities to try different scenarios at your own pace, play them however you want. Like I beat a mission super sloppily. It worked and I got out of there, but like I felt bad about it. I was like, I made a mess back there. I was like, I should do that again. And I don't know what kind of deaths these guys deserve, but that was bad.
But that's the magic of Hitman, though.
Yeah,
that's the magic of Hitman, though, because it is a game that begs to be replayed. You can go through this game within about like 6 hours, but you'd be missing 80% of what the game offers, because every mission has like at least 3 different big like set piece style assassination stories that you can do, like 3 different ways to like canonically get the target away from a crowd so that you can murder them. And then there's like a bunch of other challenges that they offer. There's specific feats that you can do. So there's so much content. And to go back to the Metal Gear Solid thing, one of the things I love about Metal Gear Solid is how you can do a bunch of stuff in Metal Gear Solid that you wouldn't expect the developers to really put in there. And in Hitman, one of the things that I love is that if you are in disguise and you are just kind of creeping around and you're hiding like in cover and someone sees you, they'll just be like, what are you doing? Why are you crouching next to a box? And if you get right up in their face, they'll like be like, excuse me, you are violating my personal space right now. Or like, you have really bad breath. So it's like a bunch of really fun little details that you just wouldn't expect a developer to really put in there.
I walked through like a crowded scene with like a gun in my hand and a bunch of people were like, can you put that away, please? And I was like dressed as a guard. So I put it away and I took out an apple. And everyone was like, oh, like, that's actually crazier than just having a gun. Like, what the hell is that?
Max, what were you?
I was going to say, like, I'm sort of kicking myself for not jumping on this game or the series sooner. Like, I think Brian's the same way, but I definitely dabbled with the first 2 a little bit. Like, I jumped in, and the thing that makes Hitman so good is obviously like the infinite ways you could replay a mission, or like the incredible number of different ways you can accomplish the same objective. I think that's what scared me off originally, because you can finish it and you can get the sort of you did your job but you sucked at it, and then it's like they pop up with a bunch of other possible objectives where it's like, oh, you didn't kill them with a banana peel or whatever. Like it's like it's just there's that it doesn't even tell you like straight up the thing you need to do. It's like the thing you need to cause to happen, which fascinates me. But I'm dying to jump into this. Also, the fact that it's now a next gen game is exciting, and the fact they managed to throw some shiny PS5 upgrades at the previous 2 games made me kind of maybe I'm not kicking myself for waiting this long to play it, because this is a good looking game to begin with.
It's gorgeous.
I was just going to say, if you own 1 and 2, you can import the levels into 3 and essentially play them in the spruced up engine. Which is a nice benefit for sure. Yeah, I think I have Hitman 1 from like a PlayStation Plus free game thing from like 6 months ago, and I've never touched it, but I'm probably gonna play it with Hitman 3 because I might as well just play it in this new engine. So it is a nice opportunity. I do want to point out from our review, which you may have just seen the B-roll of on the video version of the show if you're watching, but this was written by Luke Riley. He gave the game a 9 overall, but he did mention on the PS5 at least a couple of hurdles for getting, because there is a PSVR. You can play the whole game in PSVR. He did say because there isn't native support for PSVR and PS5, he had to download and install the PS4 version of Hitman 3 alongside the PS5 version, which is, he said, more of a thing on Sony side than IO, the devs. But you do get a free copy of the PS4 version if you get the PS5 version, so you're not like having to double dip. But it is a little bit of a VR is worth the dabble if you own a PSVR, though really only to experience its general slapstick goofiness firsthand. You have to play with the DualShock 4 because the move controllers just don't have enough buttons, and while can generally handle melee attacks, the shooting experience is really quite cumbersome, imprecise, and irritating as a consequence. The end result is a system that winds up marooned halfway between full motion controls and traditional controls, which I found regularly brain-bending and occasionally stomach-churning. So they mentioned getting to play, because you're able to play all 3 of the Hitman levels in VR, which is very great, but Luke summed it up by saying it's janky, primitive, and really not the best way to play, which is a little unfortunate. Obviously, none of us here, Mitchell, I don't think you've gotten to play it in VR either, have you?
No, I wish I did, but the thing that really makes me confused is the fact that you can't play with the move controllers, because I remember first seeing the Hitman VR,
I think that was sorry, I think that was more his like saying it just doesn't work that way.
Mm.
Oh,
I'm gonna double check, but yeah, the way I'm reading it is that it doesn't feel good with the move controllers, but I will double check that as we talk. Go
okay.
ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, the thing that sold me on Hitman VR was like the little clip of tapping a guy on the shoulder, having him turn around, then punching him in the face. I'm like, that just with a controller in your hand, like, it just feels weird. I feel like you would need to have the move controller to really, sell that in VR.
Mhm.
Yeah, it says according to IO last year when they were talking about the VR modes for the first time, they said it doesn't support PS Move controllers. So yeah,
Interesting.
which is a little bit of a bummer. But
I will say for the main game, if you play this game and you get 90 seconds into the intro and you're not entirely convinced that this is the perfect studio for a James Bond, I don't know what to tell you. Like, the fact that these guys are making James Bond is so perfect. It is so match made in heaven. I cannot wait to see what they do with that series.
yeah, it feels like even as someone who hasn't had experience with these games but wants to jump in, they just feel like such an ideal candidate for that. I'm so excited to see, whether it's in this Hitman aesthetic, I feel like they'll do something a little bit more different in structure, but they just seem so perfectly suited for it. But I did sort of just want to ask, as someone, Max mentioning too, as someone who feels like they've maybe missed the boat having only dabbled, and as someone who hasn't played them at all, does it feel like fine to just jump into 3, or should I start with those older levels from Hitman 1 and 2?
I mean, here's the thing. Story in Hitman is not one of the selling points, but it is the conclusion of a trilogy. And so if you are hoping that you'd be able to jump in and understand what's been going on, I think you really miss out on that context if you just jump into Hitman 3. So I would definitely recommend playing at least the first one. You probably should play both of them, because I think Hitman 2 is personally my favorite one, is the best one. But it's a little tough recommendation to just jump right into Hitman 3 as your first go. But people have said you can usually find the first game at the very least pretty cheap. And I can't recommend playing those games enough.
Yeah, it seems like a really fun, unique way to kick off the year. And as I think Brian was saying, I don't often think of like, oh yeah, I love stealth games, but when a stealth game is really fun, it just hits in a different way. And it seems like there's a lot to love about this one. So very excited to jump in. Well, thank you to Mitchell for joining us to talk about Hitman. Definitely excited to jump in myself. Of course, though, before we get to some other games that we've been playing, I did want to talk about PlayStation-wise. It's definitely been quiet. For the last couple of weeks, we've talked about so many exciting things to come from PlayStation 2021. And they really haven't been saying much. But we thankfully were able to get news from the best of all sources, as always, LinkedIn. A thing that we've talked about on the show before is that obviously the Sony first party of Stables is so much of the draw of why people come to PlayStation consoles in the first place. And they acquired Insomniac in early 2020. I think it was February of 2020. But otherwise, Sony hasn't really been opening new studios or increasing its volume of studios in the way that we've seen Microsoft acquiring a bunch of studios. But one thing that's sort of been a not so secret but secret thing is that PlayStation has had a new team working together in San Diego. This is different from the San Diego studio that does MLB The Show, but they've been working together in some form for at least, I think, a year or two at this point. Long-standing rumors have had people believing they're working on Uncharted. There's been no official confirmation of that in any way, but that's been sort of a long-standing rumor. But we sort of finally got our first official confirmation that this new studio, which still hasn't been announced or their first project revealed, that they were very much built and designed to continue on with existing PlayStation franchises, aka make sequels of the games we all love. So recently people spotted on Michael Mumbauer's LinkedIn profile, he was formerly listed as the studio's former head up until November 2020. And in his profile, he wrote, quote, "His latest achievements is having built a brand new all-star AAA action-adventure development team for PlayStation, based in San Diego and utilizing proprietary engine technology. This team was assembled to expand upon existing franchises and craft all new stories for the next generation of gamers. One, I sort of want to start on the topic of, it's exciting to me that I think one of the best things that we've seen from PlayStation, especially in the last generation or so, is that Sony isn't afraid to let its studios jump from one franchise to the next, whether it's, even though they dipped back in with Lost Legacy, like Naughty Dog going to The Last of Us after Uncharted, or Sucker Punch going to Ghost of Tsushima, or Guerrilla going to Horizon after Killzone. Like Sony has let those studios move on, but there are also a lot of great franchises that they probably could make a bit of money from. So starting off with this, Max, I just was sort of curious about your thoughts on like a studio built specifically to make sure they're continuing like the legacy of these franchises.
I mean, it's got to be a new MotorStorm game. I think it's
of course
pretty obvious.
Yeah.
We already got Pacific Rift, so what about Atlantic Rift? Mediterranean Rift could be good.
The Baltic, goddamn.
Just some nice.
Man.
No, this is weird to think about because
with my
no, I don't know. Like it's as exciting as it is to hear that there's like new stuff. I always have like a little bit of reservation about hearing a new studio is handling an IP that's been established by other studios. Like the first thing that comes to mind there is the what is it, Batman Arkham Origins, the one that isn't Sucker Punch, or
WB Games,
Rocksteady.
WB Games Montreal worked on,
which like a lot of people have kind of turned around on, but there's still that sort of feeling of like, oh, this, especially when we're looking at beloved sort of first party IPs that people like really come to associate respective properties with their own individual studios. Like when we're talking about Uncharted, nobody brings up Golden Abyss. Like that was Bend making an Uncharted game for Vita, which was fine, but it wasn't the game that people come to expect from Naughty Dog. So I guess I'm very curious to see what they do here. I kind of hope that they're dusting off some really old franchise that we haven't seen in a while and completely reinventing it from the ground up. I don't know. Pacific Rift, MotorStorm,
I think
definitely.
People would have remembered Golden Abyss more fondly if it wasn't a Vita game, which is a catch-22 because I think it got a lot of attention because it was a Vita game, because it was sort of like a miracle that they even got it running there. Like technically, that's one of the most impressive games ever made. In the sort of pantheon of Uncharted games, it's definitely like better than the first one, but I don't think it's better than 2 or 3 or I don't. I'm kind of mixed on 4. But an important thing about this quote is tell new stories. Like I think we're focusing a lot on them returning to this sort of on an established franchise, but I think the studio new stuff. I look at stuff like I believe who is it? Is it Saber that's working on the Witcher 3 next gen port?
I think they worked on the Switch port. I think.
There's also like stuff that's like Blue Point, which takes an entire skeleton of a game and makes something new with it. I really think this is Uncharted, and I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's a remake, a brand new game. It seems to me like Sony is going to slowly creep into movie territory with all of their video games, and I think that they don't want to be caught with their pants down having like a hit film in Uncharted. I don't necessarily know or think that movie is going to be a hit film, but just in case, without a game corresponding with that, right? Like, I mean, I think that they'd be really remiss to ship that and have that miss right there. Like, you need something to push people to your PS5 and PS4 and go, hey, if you like this movie, there's 4 Uncharted games you can play, or 5 Uncharted games you can play, or 6, 7, however many we want by then. But I do think that that's something that they can handle. And honestly, like I'm interested in an Uncharted game that isn't by Naughty Dog, because I feel like I've seen everything that they can do with that franchise, and that's reductive because I know that they can do more. And The Last of Us 2 was amazing, and that's coming from someone who always said we don't need The Last of Us 2. But I'm interested to see what somebody else could do with the series. I think that, like, spoilers, 4 left it in a way that there could be some torch passing. There could also be like a Sully prequel where he's really young and he's got a funny mustache.
Of course, there's also the possibility for something like a Lost Legacy 2. I mean, like, the further I get away from Lost Legacy, the more I look back on it so fondly, and I think it both is I get sort of what you're saying, Brian, about like you feel like you've seen all that they can do, because I think to a certain extent Lost Legacy is very much like a greatest hits collection of the best parts of the Uncharted series. And so there's not a ton that's new there, but everything there just works so damn well. And I think they use those those two characters in new and really exciting ways and flesh them out, that I would love a sequel that sort of focuses more on Nadine and has Chloe in the supporting role, sort of as like a continuation sort of thing. But like they do, you're right, have a lot of potential around that world. And I do agree that it will be something within it. And it probably wouldn't be bad to capitalize, even if it's not Nathan Drake, to be like, that movie's coming out. We know Sony loves Synergy right now, like the corporate brand above PlayStation. Sony loves Synergy. So why not also have a new Uncharted, even if it's in the works, even if it's not coming out for another year, at least to be able to say it's there.
What if it's Uncharted, the movie, the game? Like, what if they do a new Uncharted that has similar mechanics, but you've got, Tom Holland and Marky Mark in there? Like that immediately makes me just sort of like, I don't know how I feel about that, but it also isn't that completely bonkers. Like, I don't know.
It seems likely, but it's also the one I'm least interested in, I would guess. But I get where you're coming from in terms of that would make a lot of sense, because we do, in terms of young Nathan Drake, we only have those flashback scenes. So there's no reason they can't do a young Nathan Drake game. But
yeah. And also, I mean, keep in mind that like the Spider-Man game, both Spider-Man games launched basically in parallel universes to what was going on in the MCU, but still found a massive audience. So I think that if they're close enough, it'll make sense. But Max, I think that could be interesting, because we have seen like lots of flashback stuff with Nathan Drake. I just feel like we've explored everything with his character, but obviously the people making this movie don't think that. So,
I mean, it would be really interesting to see them commit entirely to an Uncharted that is not flashback scenes, but here's a prequel. Like here's an older, like here's the adventures of young Nathan Drake, period. Not as cutaways in Uncharted 3 or 4, but like that's the game. It's young Sully, young Nate running around causing trouble, and it's not just a callback, which would, I don't know, be interesting. Yeah, I could
retcon a sister in there if they want. Like,
why not? Yeah. No, I mean, thinking back to like we got Sony had some big words about like wanting to really establish movies and TV shows and all that, which is interesting to see. We still haven't really seen much of it. Like Uncharted could go either way. I feel like we've been hearing about that movie for more than my entire career, which is exhausting. But eventually it might come out. I guess they're filming it. There was, of course, also the Ratchet and Clank movie that we all forgot about, which completely coincided with the game that we all loved and adored.
Yeah, and it didn't live up and compare. That was a really weird, interesting experiment, because that game was so great, and then that movie came out and I think was disappointing in a lot of ways, where it was like, well, I can just go play the much better game right now. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there is connections to the movie, but something that is somewhat removed, because I think those two projects, like in parallel, just made the movie look so much worse by a factor of how good the game was too. But yeah, it is a really interesting space. For me, one of the more interesting prospects too is the mention of utilizing proprietary engine technology. And I don't know if that means a brand new engine or, collaborating with another studio on their engine. I would assume maybe like some mix of the two. But it's exciting to see, at least from what we've seen. There are a lot of veterans of other Sony studios here at this studio from previous job listings. Like it seems like a pretty stacked team of developers, and so I do wonder what that voice is, though, if they are jumping onto a series that already exists from something that is so iconic to Naughty Dog right now.
Right.
It does put us in an interesting place. I think for me, the other comparisons to make from PlayStation's first party studios would be Sanzaru Games took over Sly Cooper for one after the original trilogy. They did like Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, which was like the fourth entry that left off on a big cliffhanger, and then there was never another Sly Cooper, which I would have liked to see. And then forgive me, but the Sumo Digital, the devs from Sackboy and Little Big Planet 3, of course, took over for Media Molecule from LBP 1 and 2. So there is precedent, but are there any other, I think Uncharted is the main culprit. We're all assuming this is. Are there any other PlayStation franchises you would like to see a studio tackle in that capacity?
Knack, obviously.
Of course.
It's been a couple of years since we've had a Knack.
I mean, I've always wanted to see a giant vein bulging in Mark Cerny's forehead.
That's as far as we can get.
That would be pretty hilarious if they a third party like smaller studio was like, we did Knack 3, and it winds up just being this ridiculous hit and everyone loves it and it wins Game of the Year and just
And then Cerny's like, what did I do all that
he
work
just like quietly folds his hands and just goes, all right then.
Mark Cerny joins Microsoft. I did want to pose some other options, I guess, and hear from you guys as well if there were any other potentials. And one here, unfortunately, he's no longer with us on this episode. He's still alive, don't worry. But Mitchell, of course, just left. And he did mention, I'm curious what you both would think. He suggested as one that the studio could tackle PlayStation All-Stars. Would you want to see a sequel?
Make it a battle royale.
Yeah, seriously. They're loaning out all those. The God of War is in. Kratos is in Fortnite. Make your own.
I make him dance to Dua Lipa. It's very uncomfortable, but I can't stop doing it. I think PlayStation All Stars, obviously gets a little bit of a bad rap because I think it was like not the best time for that game to come out, and being such a naked clone to a certain extent of Smash Bros. But there is the nugget of a good idea there, and I feel like it could succeed if they tweak some things, made some changes, figured out what the roster is like, because that was a very strange lineup of fighters. But there is potential. At least I would love to see it. I was curious what you guys would think about if someone took on a new Infamous, or do you feel like that franchise should kind of stay put to bed? Because obviously Second Son and First Light were new protagonists. It wasn't Cole McGrath anymore. I feel like it's pretty easy to just be like, here's another guy with superpowers or a girl with superpowers or just another person. Go. It feels like there's potential there, but what do you both think?
That's a series that's totally set up for a sequel that, can only loosely connect it to the previous ones. I believe like the second one, it didn't really have more than like Easter eggs to the first one, right? Like that's all you really need to do. You go to a whole new city, have a whole new protagonist, whole new powers. I really like those games. They're super fun, especially the second one. I had a blast with that game. I'm all for just like big, crazy, over the top open world games. Like I feel like we get a lot of open world games, but a lot of them are very sort of like street level grounded. And I like games like this where you can just like run up the side of a building and jump into the sky and, dive bomb and kick somebody. Obviously, like Spider-Man's doing that, right? Like Spider-Man kind of like grabbed that and said, here's the open world superhero game you've always wanted. But I think there's room for more. We have superhero movies are tremendously popular, or at least were back when we had movies, and superhero shows will continue to carry that torch for a while. We need more games, and I don't think they all have to be licensed. I think that something like Infamous has totally has a shot to come back, and I think there's room on our PS5s for it.
No, totally. I just feel like looking at sort of how much not only the open world genre has changed, but also superhero media has changed since Infamous was first introduced, and the fact that there's nothing in the title that like it's Infamous. It could, as what it is, but also it could be anything. Like as long as it's vaguely superpowered, it's pretty much on brand, like the Hulk, and you can smash buildings. I'd be like, all right, sure, why not? Let's go nuts. That's definitely one I'd be interested to see what a new studio does to it, just because Sucker Punch has had so much sort of they've done their with it, and obviously they probably want to focus on Tsushima, but the format of Infamous as a open world superhero game is just, that's so wide open that it could be, it could yield some really cool.
This is a good one too, because I feel like this one's been long enough, right? Like we just had Uncharted 4 just a few years ago during the PS4 generation. We haven't had an Infamous since the launch of the PS4. Like we mentioned Batman before, I felt like we were getting one of those games every few years, and so when like that one went off the rails a little bit, I feel like we noticed. But this has been it's been so long that I don't think anybody would really be like. And there's also only 2 of these games, so there's less of like this is the format, this is the recipe, this is what it has to be. And so I think there's a little more wiggle room in making something interesting with this series.
Yeah, we for reference, I pulled it up because we have a really great feature on the site that basically is like how long it's been since each of the big Sony franchises have been around. In Infamous, it's been 6 years since Second Son and First Light came out in 2014. But yeah, I totally feel like, speaking to both of what you were saying, it's so malleable of a franchise at this point because it isn't like Cole McGrath is not the face, Delson is not the face. They can easily make a new hero in a new place. But it does raise that interesting question of like, what are big open world superhero games in a post Spider-Man world where that one came and was so big and captivated so many people and is sort of like the standard bearer. Because we have not seen, like, for, as you know, Brian, you were mentioning, like, as popular as comic book heroes are in movies and TV, I think, like, I did the math, I think we're going to have a Marvel show or movie for every week for at least half of the year. Like, every week for, 6 months of the year, we'll have a Marvel product in some way. But games don't have that, like, abundance yet. There is not a ton of Marvel and DC games, and obviously games by their nature can take longer time. Projects can get canceled more easily, but it has always struck me as interesting that we don't see as big of a proliferation of superhero games on consoles and PC the way we see superhero movies.
And almost all of those shows outside of like Moon Knight are using characters that have been established in like a dozen films already, right? That there's already like an audience recognition there. Whereas I don't know, like it's weird, right? I don't know how quickly audiences would gravitate to a brand new superhero in a fairly established video game franchise when there's like a plethora of really well-known ones out there. Like it feels almost strange. Like I feel like if Sony was to make another superhero game, I don't know if they'd go with Infamous now that superhero movies are so big, when they could be like, oh, make Venom, make, what's that? Who's the Jared Leto vampire? Morbius. Yeah. There's a lot of characters that they could reach across the aisle from with Marvel, through their partnership with everything they have with Spider-Man. So it'd be interesting, right? Like, I don't know if audiences would be like, hey, you guys like superheroes? You like superhero movies? Well, check out Infamous 3, starring, some random guy in Boston or whatever.
Yeah, we're at an interesting point where I think people are so glommed onto the recognizable superhero series because they have become essentially the pillars of blockbuster entertainment, for better and worse. Like there's a lot of give and take there. So it would.
If you look at The Boys, like most people didn't know that was based on a graphic novel or anything, and they were just like, I like superheroes, I watched the show, and it's a great show. So who knows? Yeah.
I do want to throw a couple other suggestions out. Of course, Max mentioned MotorStorm. It's been 9 years since MotorStorm Apocalypse in May 2011, though there was an RC car spinoff the following year for PS3 and Vita.
Hey, can I just say that the MotorStorm Apocalypse camera mode or photo mode was phenomenal, and I think that was maybe I'm trying to think, like, was that might have been one of the first party Sony games that had that.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the earliest.
You could you would explode your car and then you'd zoom out and you just have this cool picture, like a picture of a car exploding. It's great. And they said in the thing, they said proprietary engines. You know how many proprietary engines are in those souped up dump trucks? A lot. It's
At
great.
least 2.
I really would love a new MotorStorm game.
It would be really fun. I do think there is. But part of me is, like looking at this, the LinkedIn profile says AAA action adventure. That is not something that the Sony first party lineup is lacking in. So part of me is a little disheartened that it wasn't like we're working on, a AAA first person shooter. Maybe it is a first person shooter, but that wasn't mentioned specifically. Like I would like to see the studio portfolio branch out a little bit, I guess. But in terms of other past franchises, I just wanted to throw a couple more at you guys to see what you would think. It's been over 15 years since Jak and Daxter. Do you think Jak and Daxter should come back?
Yeah, theoretically.
Yeah. It's one of those, it's in that weird in between where, because I think Naughty Dog, people obviously know because Crash is still around to a certain extent. I think people liked Jak and Daxter quite a bit, but it doesn't have that cultural recognition. I think that's something like Crash or Uncharted and Last of Us have for Naughty Dog. So it's in this weird in between space.
It would definitely need the characters would need a visual overhaul for starters. Like those guys are decidedly mid 2000s, that's very early 2000 art direction and fashion there. But never say never, right? I mean, I think there's always an opportunity to take a franchise like that and reboot it, revitalize it, and modernize it for new audiences and make it look awesome. I mean, like Ratchet and Clank, if you had told me when that franchise was first kicking around that would be one of my most anticipated things on PlayStation 5, I mean, I'd have a lot of questions for you, especially about when I get to play PlayStation 5. But also that's pretty surprising, right? That game demoed incredibly well. I feel like you could make a Jak and Daxter game that looks that good and people would be paying attention immediately.
Yeah, I think especially at launch, Sackboy and Astra's Playroom showed there is plenty of room for like more family friendly or all ages fare within the first party lineup. Two others I briefly want to mention: Socom. That was a franchise that seemed like really integral to Sony's persona, back in the day on like PS1 and PS2. I don't know about where it would fit in this day and age. I know there is still like there's a really dedicated still like SOCOM fan base that calls for its return, like there are for a lot of franchises, but that I don't see that fitting within the scope of probably what the studio is going after. I don't know if either of you have much experience with SOCOM, but
I feel like the Rainbow Six and Call of Duty sort of like came in and cleared the table of all of that, right? Like I don't know if there's room for that. I feel like at this point it'd be sort of like launching like another battle royale game and trying to make your way there, which I guess people still try, right? It still happens. So
no, I mean specifically with like a straight-laced military shooter, I think that you do have so many other like studios and publishers that put those out on a consistent basis, and they've got it kind of down to a science. Like I was kind of there's that Back 4 Blood game, which I'm sure is really exciting for people who are like hardcore Left 4 Dead fans, but I'm wondering how that's going to be received when, like Left 4 Dead was great when it came out. That was like, 10, 12 years ago or whatever. And, I think if you have a studio that has to reinvent from the ground up this like spiritual successor, whereas another company like, I don't know, like Call of Duty puts out a zombies mode like every year. Like they have a chance to fine tune that and also kind of steer the direction that this genre is going. Like with SOCOM, like what would be the advantage of a studio spinning up from the ground up a brand new proprietary multiplayer shooter? Like it just seems like a total uphill battle,
Yeah.
And then aside from that, it would be almost by definition, it would be probably M-rated, which halves how many people can pick it up. And then also it's, I don't know, military stuff it's kind of starts veering into political directions, and I don't know how many people even want to deal with that when you could just have like, I don't know, Sackboy is back or whatever.
And he's political this time. Yeah. Last but not least, I think the only other one that immediately came to mind for me is, of course, Ape Escape.
That's where you go. I thought you were going to say, yes. I thought you were going to say Resistance, Killzone.
Oh, no, there were plenty of others. I do want to mention those franchises as well. But no, I did want to bring up Ape Escape. I mean, like, man, I think Ape Escape was the first PlayStation game I ever played. I think I have like a distinct memory of going over to my neighbor's house and playing Ape Escape and being like, "This is incredible."
That's how they debuted the DualShock.
The
analog stick.
That's what's awesome about the DualSense. I think that's a match made in heaven, but also I want hyper realistic.
Yes. Right? I want Cha-Cha the Monkey Zoo Escape, the game. Brian and I have talked about this extensively on numerous podcasts, but in real life, there was an actual Ape Escape that took place in Japan. And was it a gorilla, a chimpanzee?
I think he started the day as a chimpanzee, but he looked like a gorilla by the end of the day.
Okay. This furry character named Cha-Cha escaped from the zoo, and then a bunch of people, like, I guess Japan has like their special animal control officers who all sort of look like the Beastie Boys Intergalactic video. They like went after him with like long sticks, and they'd like get him down from trees. And I was like, just give me a game that is Ape Escape, but it like has the graphical fidelity of like The Last of Us, but you're just chasing down monkeys that have science experiments that they're trying to kill you with.
While we're on the subject, it's also worth pointing out that Japan also has these weird sort of like simulation days where they get one of their employees to dress up as like basically like a mascot version of a zoo animal. And he pretends or she pretends to escape, and then the other zookeepers have to try to catch them. And that's like a good practice for when real life cha-cha situations happen.
That's their version.
I don't know if you're lying or not.
It could be.
You didn't know that? That's
real.
You of all people should know that. There's no way
real?
you don't know that. Yeah, that's real.
They have they use mascots to replicate zoo animal escapes. What?
Yeah, man.
No.
Yes. Why would I make that?
That's the weirdest version of like an elementary school fire drill I've ever heard of.
I'm going to send it to you guys now.
That's amazing.
But yeah, Ape Escape is a good answer. Yeah.
Ape Escape would be great. Yeah. But no, I did want to mention those shooter franchises too, Brian. I think for me, Killzone is less likely of a candidate, especially with, I don't know, Guerrilla sort of going all in on Horizon right now. The sort of sunsetting of the Killzone website sort of implying that they're not as focused on that franchise right now. I don't. It's the same sort of thing of like, versus spinning up a new franchise. I don't know how much there's like a real call for a new Killzone. But I guess you could maybe make the same argument for Resistance, where that was also a really beloved franchise by a lot of people, but I don't know how much fervor there is for new Resistance these days versus creating a new franchise. I guess like weighing the benefits of staying with a name that people know versus trying to make something new. Or I guess finding the middle ground of those two is what the studio should do. Mm-hmm. But does either franchise really ring as something either of you are really interested in seeing a continuation of?
I mean, I'm interested in a modern take on Resistance, or a new effort in telling those stories there. I think that like art wise, there's a lot that interests me. That interests me more, like that, because that delves into like horror stuff a little bit, right? A lot of like very sort of like deranged and extremely sci-fi creature design, whereas like Killzone's futuristic and it's cool, but it's also, which I always gravitate more towards the grittier stuff. But I think there's room there, right? Like I think with all these franchises, I think it's less about banking on the sort of namesake of people who remember them fondly. You need those people, but you also need to create a brand new thing for people who didn't grow up in that generation at all. 15 years in video games is eternity. Like it is forever. There are people making $100 million a year right now playing video games, and they started gaming 8 years ago. They're 15 and they're billionaires. And I'm jealous.
That's a good point. What Brian said, like it's that double-edged sword of like, if you dust off the Resistance, brand, and you're like, great news, everybody, we're making a new Resistance game, and the people who remember it are like, yeah, well, you better not screw it up. Here's the things I want it to do. Don't change anything. And then at the same time, you're trying to appeal to an entirely new audience who doesn't really care one way or the other. To touch on what Brian said, and to go back to the sort of infamous, namesake, like Resistance can, it has an established universe, but it could also just be like a game about humans fighting aliens. Like you are the Resistance against an alien invasion. That's pretty straightforward. Whereas, Killzone inherently has like a bunch of, lore about Hellgast and stuff, and
Resistance does feel like a good blank slate. And it's funny, I think every time I see Insomniac tweet out a Resistance screenshot, because they do often like funny callbacks to Resistance or Ratchet and Clank or whatnot, but every time I see one of those come up, there's at least like one or two blog posts or Reddit threads that are like, is Resistance returning? So there obviously like is some sort of built-in anticipation there. But I agree, I think there is I think for me saying what's the value of going with the old name versus doing something new is just exactly what you're saying, is like you then have the built-in expectations of that dedicated fan base that is still there, but then also have to figure out how to make a new audience care about a thing that they have maybe heard the name before of and not played. But it could be something completely new and exciting, especially with, I think, Insomniac probably a little busy on some other franchises they're working on.
Two things real quick. One, I swear there was like a job listing LinkedIn thing on Guerrilla a couple years ago talking about staffing up for a multiplayer thing. Do you guys remember that?
I do. I'm going to try to pull it up because I know what you're talking about. So keep going.
In the meantime, I will say I feel so much sympathy for any social media manager running any major company who evokes nostalgia in any way, because it's an easy play and it's good to dip into your company's history of games. But insane people like me see these things and then we immediately jump off the diving board. Like Capcom tweeted out it was just a gif of like the Resident Evil 4 inventory management, where like they find the gold egg that you get from killing the chickens sometimes, and everybody lost their minds and they're like, you're making Resident Evil 4, you're remaking it, blah blah blah. Which, by the way, that inventory system's back for 8, which I'm so happy about. But yeah, you can't just put up a picture of Resistance without people thinking like, new game.
Yeah, it's pretty freaking. And I did find where this happened. I mean, just on that new game thing of like with the Resistance. Interestingly, I'm sure we'll only spin things out. But Sony Santa Monica put up a job listing for a role, I think today or yesterday, that was like for an unannounced title. So immediately it's always like is it another God of War? Is it something new? Like job listings can create so much fervor when obviously they're just trying to get some good talent to come in. But yeah, in 2019, there were job listings for a multiplayer project for Guerrilla Games. And that headed by a game director who had worked on Watch Dogs 2, Rainbow Six Siege, Splinter Cell, Killzone 2, Far Cry Instinct and more. According to their Twitter profile, they are still listed as a game director at Guerrilla. So that project seemingly is still there in the works, but we'll see if it ends up being a Horizon multiplayer project, a return of Killzone in some way. There's a lot of possibility there for sure. But yeah, it's very exciting that there is another studio that's just sort of in the works there, but it is that sort of thing of like, man, I just kind of want some inkling of what it is. And it feels like we're getting incrementally closer to what it is. But hopefully, at some point this year, Sony's kind of a blank slate in terms of what they're going to do. If they're going to do state of plays, if they're going to do showcases again, if they're going to go to, events, if they happen this year, it's completely up in the air for what Sony's going to do this year, which is both exciting and a little daunting because I feel like we're going to have a lot of last minute, well, they announced something on a Thursday, time for a second episode of Beyond this week sort of weeks. But it's exciting. It's exciting in that so much is unknown right now at the start of this generation.
Well, as long as we keep making the show, they'll keep announcing stuff immediately afterwards. So we just gotta keep making the show and people get news. It's a good deal.
You're welcome, all you PlayStation ponies out there. Before we move on to, got a couple good emails I want to read, but I did just want to briefly bring up, Max, obviously, since you and I have not been playing Hitman, have you been playing anything else recently that you've been sort of stuck on or?
Yeah, no, I'm completely just head over heels in love with Yakuza Like a Dragon, and I feel stupid for sleeping on it last year. It is a phenomenal RPG, and I implore everyone to go check it out. I mean, I admittedly, like, I play a lot of these games and I was sort of like, I'm a little bit tired, but I'll give it a shot. And then giving it its fair shot, it is so good. It is like, it has such wonderfully well-written characters. It is consistently funny and heartfelt and really fun. And it's just a good ass video game. And I think I'm like 54 hours in and I've got like one or two chapters left, but like, I'm excited to put it to bed, but I've also had a really, really good time playing it. So.
And what have you been playing on? Because I know the PS5 version isn't out until March. I've
been playing on PS4, which has, or PS5, but with the PS4 version, which again, that was one hang up that kept me from jumping on that. But it's like totally fine. It looks great. It's gorgeous. The load times are insignificant, so that's handy. I'm actually really curious what they wind up doing with the next gen version. First thing comes to mind is probably using the DualSense to make it feel like you're actually pulling toys out of a UFO catcher machine.
I was gonna say there's so many like mini game or like side ideas in the Yakuza games usually from when you talk about them that I feel like they could do a lot of wacky stuff with the DualSense if they wanted to.
Definitely.
Brian, have you been playing anything else besides Hitman that you can talk about, or
just Hitman, Resident Evil 4, and then another game that we can talk about next week that I'm playing that I am excited to talk about.
Fair enough. I look forward to hearing about the next Uncharted 2. But no, I also wanted
the next Uncharted 2. That's the
Uncharted
name
2 returns.
Uncharted 2 again. Yeah. I do. That makes me want to say really one dumb thing. It's not related to the show. I think I want goofy, dumb video game names because I think one of the worst names I've seen recently is New Pokemon Snap. That's not a video game title. That's just an SEO phrase they put on a box and called the game. So please, Sony, please make your game names weird and funny.
And you know what? It works because once they called something New Super Mario Brothers and everybody was like, when's the new Super Mario Brothers? They were like, now.
Yep. Yeah, it's just there all the time. Anyway, I played over the long weekend that we had here. I played The Last Campfire, which is from Hello Games. It was sort of they've done one or two of these smaller games while they also work on No Man's Sky and continue updating that game. But this came out, I think, at like August of last year. It was at a very awkward time where we were in the middle of these work from home events that we were putting on, and the fall rush was just beginning. And man, I wish I had played it back then so I could have talked about it and told everyone to play it for a Game of the Year consideration. It is a like 6 or 7 hour game. It's been on sale recently on a lot of things. It's on like every platform. So if you can find it, I highly recommend it. It's not a super long ask, but it's just a very wonderful Captain Toad-esque puzzle game that is also a very sweet meditation on like the purpose of living. And the purpose of, helping other people versus being selfish. And like it addresses a lot of very mature themes in a very sweet, wholesome, almost storybook-esque way, but in a way that doesn't feel pandering or like talking down as if it's just for children. Like it works really well within the It's just a very lovely, heartwarming game that I'm so glad I blabbed about it on like end of year stuff. But it's a lot of really fun puzzle setups where essentially it's figuring out how to get from the beginning of a level to the end by moving different platforms in certain ways or using the perspective of the level to shift stuff around properly. Because you essentially get a power midway through the game that lets you move blocks or move ladders or things in the world that you couldn't move otherwise. So it lets you kind of see things from a different perspective. It's really wonderful and delightful, and I can't recommend it enough.
What made you play this like this week specifically?
Simon Cardy from our UK team played it 2 weeks ago and was like, I also wish I had played this in 2020. And he and I just awesome. He tends to have very similar, like he and I tend to agree on games quite often. So I was like, I should probably check this out. And I think he described it as like Captain Toad-esque. And I was like, all right, you sold me because I love Captain Toad. I think it's so great. And yeah, it's delightful and really fun. And I hope Hello Games continues to make little games like this because it really was a just great, like it's a fantastic weekend game. You can beat it in a weekend. It's quite an emotional journey. It goes some really fun places. The character design's really cute. I definitely recommend it. I think even when it's not on sale, it's only $15 or $20, so it's definitely worth it. And for PlayStation fans who care, it is a tremendously easy platinum trophy to get. So if you care about that, you'll get a platinum trophy within 6 hours. But like regardless of where you play it, I think it's on Apple Arcade. Like it's everywhere. Definitely check it out if you can. I think it's a really lovely game. But other than that, wrap up, I did have a memory card story I want to read, but also an email that came in from Chris, wrote into beyond@ign.com. Like you can, if you have questions, comments, concerns, memory card stories, or anything else you want to just write in with. But Chris wrote in, and the subject line was just quite simply Bloodborne.
Hell yeah. I love those emails.
The email began, well, you got me when nothing else did. I played Demon's Souls for 10-ish hours on the PS3 many years ago before falling off, figuratively, but also literally off many ledges, and deciding it wasn't for me, so I've never tried any of the Dark Souls games or Bloodborne. I was worried about wasting my money for a game that would be too difficult and too obtuse to be enjoyable. Even hearing so many people gush about Bloodborne for years, looking at you, Brian, wasn't enough to sway me, but there was always something in the back of my mind about it for some reason. Thanks to my wonderful wife, I got a PS5 for Christmas, and it seemed there was no better time to try it since it's on the PlayStation Plus collection, but still I hesitated. Then you posted your long talks about Let's Play from early last year. That did it. That sold me. I downloaded it this weekend and jumped in, intending to just mess around for a bit and decide if I wanted to really play it. I'm happy to say that I beat the Cleric Beast on my first try, and I got the next boss on my second try. I'm in, I'm hooked. You did this to me. Now I can't wait to go back to that hellscape and mix it up with those gross and terrible beasts. So thanks for giving me the final push I needed to get into it. I hope you find a way to continue the Let's Play series, even if you're not back in the office anytime together soon. Also, I think you should do a reverse trophy test for it, where the rest of the panel quizzes Jonathan about real or fake Bloodborne trophies.
I platinumed that game, and I don't know if I could name a lot of the trophies. And like, it's all super obtuse stuff.
That's fair. But anyway, they said, I always enjoy the show and I really enjoyed the Let's Play Beyond from Chris. Beyond. So thank you, Chris. Thank you for writing in. I'm glad we were able to convince you about Bloodborne. And I just wanted to say thank you again to everyone who's written in or tweeted at us or talked about after they watched that Let's Play. It was such a fun day that now even more so stands out so clearly in my head because I think it is the last like very social thing I did before we were all stuck in our homes. Like it because of the iPhone change where they bring up like on this day photos now all the time, the group photos of us together just keep popping up on my feed, and every time I see it I'm just like, yes, the before times. What a glorious day that was.
It's definitely the last time I ate pizza with like people that weren't my wife and a baby. Which is nice.
I mean, the fact that we would all just pass around a single box of pizza is,
I know, right? Nowadays we'd have to be like in separate rooms. One of my favorite parts of this job is emails like that. Honestly, it's telling people sometimes for hours a week for 6 years straight that they should play a game. And it eventually resonating and connecting with people, and then them having an experience that I so wish I could have for the first time. Yeah, that rules. I love that so much.
Yeah. And very quickly, though that wasn't written in as a memory card, I did want to just quickly read a memory card story we got in from Jake from Bakersfield. Jake wrote in, and said that they're an on and off listener to Beyond, but I've been working long hours during COVID and slowly gotten back into podcasts. I always love the memory card segment and wanted to add a quick, oddly comic one in. So Jake said, in 2006, I didn't have current consoles, so mostly missed that entire generation of games, unless it was on PC, which I convinced my dad to invest in, keeping relatively current, even if I wasn't allowed to have very many games. My hobby was sustained by handheld and lots of hours of modded Morrowind, so I was completely baffled when I picked up a new copy of Tomb Raider Legend at Target, and it just didn't boot at all. I assumed the disc was just bad and convinced my dad to drive me back to the store and exchange it for another copy. Short drive, no big deal. And then the same thing happened. Flash forward to copy 4 as my increasingly frustrated parent is trying to talk to a sales rep into giving me back my money, even though we've now opened like half the store's inventory of this Tomb Raider game. My dad vocally defended me and my ability to read PC specs and said this is not my fault, but that the computer should be able to run it. This is an argument he's determined to win in that moment, and he did. And when we got back in the car with my money back in hand, my dad sitting next to me still have mumbling under his breath. That was when I realized our PC didn't have a DVD drive. I never said anything, and I still haven't played that Tomb Raider.
Oh,
Not your usual memory card, I know, but my father's full-throated defense and an increasing frustration at my stupid mistake just makes me laugh. I love that one. I know it's not PlayStation related exactly, but I thought it was just too funny not to read. So thank you, Jake, for writing in with the memory card story. If you want to share a memory card, you can by writing into beyond@ign.com. Please write in with the subject line memory card. And we'll read those every week on the show. Before we wrap up, just very quickly want to ask, what's something, other than maybe a game, Brian, I'll start with you. What's something you've read, watched, listened to, whatever, that you recently enjoyed?
Let's see. I watched Nomadland, which is
nice.
a movie that's coming out this year. It's going to win a ton of awards. I really liked it. And I just watched a movie last night that's super obscure. And Max, I'm recommending it to you specifically. It just came to Shudder. It's called The Wolf House.
sounds good.
It's The Wolf House. It's about a woman who escapes a cult, but it is entirely done in stop motion, and it is super creepy. It is all like paper mache and handmade. It's like a nightmare Little Big Planet, but a lot wetter and scarier. I think you'll dig it. This is definitely not the kind of thing I would recommend to like mass audiences, but if any of the things I just said sound interesting to you, I don't get to see Max in person anymore, so I'm just telling Max to watch The Wolf House. And
if you love Avengers Endgame, you'll love The Wolf House. Max, anything that you want to recommend as well?
Yeah, I mean, while we're recommending Wolf stuff, I watched this a few weeks ago, but Wolf of Snow Hollow is a sort of indie horror comedy, I guess. And I had a very good time with it. It involves some wolf stuff. Go in cold. It's, as you can tell by the title, it involves a wolf, but you never know what's going to happen with wolves.
And to continue, I guess, the trend of wolves, I started watching Adventure Time, which stars a dog, which is sort of a brother of a wolf, if you will. I finally decided to watch that show.
And if you like Bloodborne, check out Brotherhood of the Wolf, which is hard to find unless they re-released it on Blu-ray. It's French. I don't know.
Hopefully that will leave you with plenty to do in the meantime before our next episode of Beyond, because that is going to pretty much wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you, Max and Brian, so much for joining me for this week's episode. And of course, thank you to Mitchell as well. And thank you to our producer, Red, for helping to keep this show running in between all of our crazy goofs. Before we wrap up, you can find us all on Twitter. I'm at JM Dornbush, Brian is at Agent Bizzle, and Max is at Max Scoville, and Mitchell is at Jurassic Rabbit. Otherwise, Beyond is live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific on beyond.ign.com, youtube.com/IGN and your favorite podcast services around the world. I said podcast weird. Please forgive me. It's been a while since I've said that word, apparently. Otherwise, thank you all so much for listening and watching. We hope you're safe. We hope you're well. And as always, Beyond.
Beyond.